Two things I liked about that, and one thing I didn't like. The two things I liked was obviously anyone who takes photographs, anyone who's using photography is a creator. They want to be creative. So the idea that we created a program that enabled their creativity and our creativity to work together as one in a highly relevant and engaging competitive environment was something that played to the audience and it played to their passions. The one thing I didn't like about the film, and I made a note to the person who shot it, and I liked so much about the program, it was very, very successful, but to say that there was no media cost, well, actually for the last 4 years, we've been spending a lot of money with Ashton Kutcher in magazine advertising. So the equity of Ashton Kutcher and him being developed with Nikon has actually been established. So that relationship between paid media, earned media, owned media, that's a dynamic relationship, and I think that's one of the most exciting things that we can take full responsibility for. One of the things that I find a bit concerning, and I found it contrasts with some of the markets I work in, that the concept of our creativity has to do with paid media. I think that's absolutely wrong. I think our creativity is as fundamental whether it's in paid media, the media that we're owning, the brands are creating, or the media that has to be earned. So I think this is a very exciting opportunity because actually when we think about the agency world, obviously the agency world is going to talk about ideas. We're in the business of ideas, the business of creativity and brand experiences. And fundamentally, if we just think the fact that we're in those businesses, you have to say now that the business has evolved, we're also in the business of doing community involvement, the community management. It's not just storytelling. We've got to think about communities and understand how to nurture and work with them in a highly proactive way. Again, different skills, but it's an adaptation of what we've done for so long. And now actually it becomes much more fundamental. I read this on the plane coming out. This was Saturday's Financial Times. I advise you to read it. If I could give any advice, everyone in the audience is very smart, but let me say this is the first major interview with Mark Zuckerberg for 4 years. And it's phenomenal when he talks about what's going on because they now have what they consider, as he says, his quote, this is the early stage. The vision of where this goes now after 4 years. Well, after 4 years at 520 million users, Facebook deals, it's a fundamentally new and exciting service to transform business at the local level. The entire online experience has been improved, homepage, email, gaming, photos. In fact, now 1,000 of the top 1 sites on the internet are woven together with Facebook, making it very difficult to unpick and disconnect. So if you think that now where they are with photos, they've overtaken Flickr, they've overtaken Yahoo Photos, they've overtaken everyone now with 3 billion pieces of creative content tagged and aligned. And now, gaming, you think what they've done with Singer is phenomenal. So this is a phenomenon that is only just beginning and already it's having such fundamental effect because what that means now is, the slide didn't come out properly, marketing 3.0. We're in the business of obviously persuasion, marketing, persuasion and consumer influence. And if we understand the forces of consumer influence and persuasion, I think this is very exciting, but it's not that we are on the left and the consumers or humans are on the right. We have to put ourselves fundamentally in the middle and understand that we're in the business of persuasion and influence. And if we think about it that way, we actually get very excited because there's an abundance of data. Brand engagement data, customer data, the level of data. When I started in this industry, I had to wait 6 days for an audience rating. I had to wait 3 weeks for any kind of newspaper or magazine readership data. Now, I get instantaneous, second by second click data on what people are doing. Not what they think, what they feel, what they read, what they do. So personally, it gets more and more exciting every day because that allows us to reimagine what is the consumer journey, what is that path to purchase, how does the consumer go from undecided to decided? Because we're all in the business of taking suspects, turning them into prospects, they become buyers, they become advocates, and once we're in the advocacy business, we're in the business where the marketing markets itself, where the advertising advertises itself. We start to get the flywheel and it starts to become very exciting, but we have to map it. And as best as we can, we have to try and control it. So I wanted to share with you some trends that I think are going to become much more fundamental on a worldwide basis, which only enhance our role and our responsibility in the business. I think only make what we do much more exciting because now creativity is much more important in different ways for the business. So the first one is direct to consumer, e-commerce, mobile commerce. I mean, this is just beginning. When we think about 4G mobile broadband, it's game changing. I think about all the clients I'm working with in packaged goods, in financial services, in the leisure category, and now they can really imagine a long tail of business. A long tail of business that they can be much more specific and targeted about who they work with. It doesn't mean that they have to do everything through the same retailer channels, selling and trading and engaging with the same audiences in the same way. It gives an ultimate opportunity. And you know this if you use the web yourself. Hyperlocal. The notion when I grew up in the business that brands were built and driven top down. And now we have the opportunity to think about what we can do to activate brands at a hyper-local level in a transactional and episodic way. So what do we do in a particular part of Hamburg on Mother's Day on 4th Street? We can target now with a level of precision that makes the world very, very exciting. So the idea that we're actually driving brand building capabilities from the top but activating in a hyper-local fashion, I think is something that's yet to be really driven hard. The second is own media. If we think about brands and businesses, the one phenomenon I'm seeing is that many of my clients are starting to develop more capabilities inside their own organizations for those skills and talents to make sure that they can understand that the content they're developing and the media that they own needs to be managed in a very proactive way. It needs to be nurtured, not on a daily basis or a weekly basis. This isn't a campaign. This is something that has to happen on a second-by-second basis. So when people can self-manage themselves and they can actually use the utility of brands and services, what increases? Loyalty. You know it yourselves. Shopper marketing. I mean, the one thing that I've always seen when I started working again in this business, everyone talked about consumer marketing, and we focused on our advertising, we focused on our promotional marketing, but trade marketing was considered to be separate. Trade marketing was something that was disconnected from brand focus and creativity because it was something that was involved with the retailers and it was managed by sales and trade. Now those are coming together, and I think again it's another opportunity for us to be very holistic, both strategically and creatively throughout the engagement process. Because who's to say the decision, not the consideration, not the preference, I'm talking about the insistence, the decision for what is acquired, what's bought, is made, as we know, at the point of purchase. So the idea that we can actually be creative and ignite at that point, I think is a fantastically exciting area as well, with developing that. Again, sorry, the chart's not ideal. Social and earned media, the idea that we can work with our clients and actually understand that within the context of our strategy, the creativity in these areas is something that we now have to take control over and fully integrate. Marcelo was saying that earlier with some of his examples as well. The notion that we are going to be professionally creative across a spectrum of opportunity, I think is another very, very exciting opportunity if we learn the canvas, if we really understand the tools and we develop the skills and the competencies. I made this point because last night I actually had a meeting of our Global Creative Leadership Collective, and it was a very interesting conversation when we talked a lot about the new platforms. We were talking about search, social, mobile, and ultimately the conversation happened when we said, okay, let's talk about craft. Let's talk about the promise of craft. Is it a promise that is very exciting when we look at actually what's happening, when we look at the way creatively these tools and devices are being used, and actually the belief was, no, it is not. The reality is pretty horrible. The promise isn't very exciting, and we have got a lot more to do when it comes to craft excellence in terms of really leveraging all these opportunities to the point of their absolute potential. So there's some of the thoughts I have about this. I think it's very exciting. It makes marketing much more engaging, much more addressable, and fundamentally much more creative. So thank you very much. Oh, one last quote. I love this one. I share this as much as I do. Mario Andretti, one of my favorite racing stars. If everything seems under control, you're not going fast enough. So one of the things that I have to urge a lot of my agencies around the world is, it's okay to not know. It's okay to be unsure. It's okay to get things wrong. It's not okay to put your head in the sand and imagine it's not going to happen or we can get away with not really understanding what's going on. So, if you like, any questions? It's okay, I'll leave it.
You look like you had a laugh, yes. It's better now, host. What particular examples do you have in one of these fields from your company?
Say again?
One particular examples from your company in one of these 5 trends or examples you actually executed so far.
We have trends in every one. I just wouldn't say we have this. I mean, if I look across the breadth of the clients we're working on, I mean, you can look in all of them. I mean, I think let's take one of them. I mean, certainly when it comes to the shopper marketing, I've got General Mills, Nestle, L'Oreal. All these are packaged goods. These are consumer companies who are now understanding that they have a holistic consideration for the brand essence and its creative expression is something that needs to be taken forward much more into the retail arena. And that brand power is actually what is going to give them the leverage with the retailers that they're working with. Because the retailers now, especially if we've come out of a very tough economic environment, where it's been very much about price and tonnage, and it's been a different kind of conversation, they need strong brands. Again, at the end of the day, the retailers have their own competitive pressures, and they want to make sure that they're getting the throughput. So I think this is one very exciting one. I think in terms of the owned media, one of the clients that we work with, I think does exceptionally well across the world, is Coca-Cola. I think Coke now are very public about the fact that in the US only a third of their money is spent in paid media. 2/3 is spent in shared media, the shared media they have with the retailers, their owned media, their vending machines, their trucks, all of everything they have with the bottlers, as well as the content that they create as well. And we're working with them in a very precise way to try and make sure that they get the optimum blend according to internet penetration and web usage and the development. Because obviously what we do in India is obviously very different to Korea, is very different to Germany. So, there are a few examples. I would say that those are trends and opportunities, but they are not exercised as universally as I would like. Now, I think there's 3 reasons for that. One is obviously the culture of the client organization, because this is all about change. As much as this is change and challenge for the agency, it's a challenge for the clients. The second is the way consumers are behaving, and obviously web usage is a lot to do with that. And the third is our own organization and the speed at which we're making the transition from a legacy business model of advertising to one that is all about content and brand experience. Maybe that was a long enough answer. Andere Frage? Also vielen Dank.